Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are back with another episode of Daily Palantir, and on today's episode, we have another announcement that gets a little bit more specific in terms of what Palantir is doing in Israel. I know 2 days ago, Bloomberg reported, and they quoted Alex Karp in terms of saying that they are supplying defense technology to Israel. Today, we have an actual strategic partnership announcement between the Israeli government and Palantir. So we got a lot to talk about. I want to dissect that, break that down. What does that mean? Understand a little bit more, figure out the implications. And then on top of that, I want to talk a little bit more about the macro and Palantir price actions, since we're having a nice little recovery today based on the lows that we were at in the beginning of the week. All right, big episode. Let's get into it. So quickly, let's do some price action that I think is important to discuss in terms of what we are seeing for Palantir. So what we see right here, Palantir $16.82, up about 0.81% of the day. Not too bad. We did fall a bit to the 1640s at one point, and then we recovered here to 1681. What's really interesting this week about Palantir price action is that we were at 1567 last Friday when we got the Jeffries downgrade, and then we catapulted back to the 1590s, and then today we actually touched 17 at one point, now it's 1681. And really that was in large part of two things. Number one, Cathie Wood bought a lot of shares, so we saw institutions start to load up on the dip. She bought about 1 million shares last week when we got down to that Jeffries downgrade. About 6 or 7% decline. And then on top of that, we actually got some pretty good CPI and PPI data that came out today. Now, obviously, the CPI data was not amazing yesterday. CPI, Consumer Price Index for inflation, came in hotter than expected. We thought we would be at 3.2% year over year. Now it's at 3.4%. So inflation a little bit stickier. But then the PPI came out today. The PPI is the Producer Price Index, how much producers are paying for goods versus how much consumers are paying for those goods. And that came in much lower than expected. Let me pull up those numbers real quick right here. Those numbers came in lower on the monthly and on the weekly, which was really, really good for the broader stock market. And it needed those numbers given how essentially hot the CPI numbers were. So PPI plus 1% year over year versus expectations of plus 1.3%, negative 0.1% month over month versus expectations of plus 0.1% month over month. So I believe yesterday's CPI, which is obviously incredibly important for Palantir. Palantir is a growth stock. Interest rates affect growth stocks the most. So we need interest rates to come down in order for growth stocks to have a better environment to go higher. Palantir is no stranger to that. Yesterday's CPI to me was more of an anomaly based on today's PPI, and I think the market thinks so as well. Right now, there's a 77% chance that the market is pricing in for Fed cuts in March. If those Fed cuts happen in March, Palantir and a lot of other growth stocks are likely, not guaranteed, but likely going to have an easier time to do well, and their valuations are going to be a little bit easier for the market to digest, even if the overall growth isn't there, because the interest rate environment is just going to be better. If we don't have a good CPI or PPI over the next couple of months, meaning inflation is a bit stickier than expected, then interest rates are going to be higher and Palantir is not going to necessarily benefit until we get those cuts, which might happen in May. So overall, price action is good today. Wanted to get you guys up to speed on what's going on in the macro. Inflation doesn't seem like it's an issue. This PPI today really proved the CPI was a bit of an anomaly yesterday, and that December is lagging on some data that January and February are probably not going to lag on, but it's something to keep an eye on over the next couple months until we get that inevitable rate cut. Okay, so let's get into the big news today, which was this new Bloomberg article that came out for Palantir. So here we go. Thiel's Palantir, Israel agree for a strategic partnership for battle tech. Let's read from here. Palantir Technologies, the data analysis firm that provides militaries with AI models, has agreed to a strategic partnership with the Israeli Defense Ministry to supply technology to help the country's war efforts. The agreement followed a Thursday meeting between Israeli defense officials and Palantir co-founders Peter Thiel and Alex Karp in Tel Aviv, according to Executive Vice President Josh Harris, who is also in attendance. Both parties have mutually agreed to harness Palantir's advanced technology in support of war-related missions, Harris told Bloomberg on Friday. This strategic partnership aims to significantly aid the Israeli Ministry of Defense in addressing the current situation in Israel. No further details on the arrangement were disclosed, including what technology will be provided. Palantir last year introduced its AIP, or Artificial Intelligence Platform, an intelligence and decision-making platform that can analyze enemy targets and propose battle plans. So, obviously, a lot more specific in terms of what we're doing in Israel. Here is a picture of Thiel and Karp with Israeli defense ministers. And this is in Tel Aviv. So we've got Karp and Thiel. We haven't seen Karp and Thiel in a long time. We just saw them a couple days ago speaking together at the university. But in terms of an actual formal picture, we haven't seen them together in a long time. And there you go. There is Peter Thiel. There is Alex Karp. There's the Israeli flags behind them. And they're with the IDF, ultimately coming to a very big strategic partnership. Now, this strategic partnership we knew was happening for a long time. Obviously, we were speculating on it, and a couple of days ago, Karp confirmed that our products are in more demand after the Hamas attacks. Today is the official announcement of a strategic partnership between Israeli Defense Force officials, the IDF, and Palantir themselves. Now, again, what does this mean for shareholders? I think there's two implications to this that are the most important. Number one, I believe that Israel is likely paying for this. Israel has spent $25 billion a year on defense technology. This is not the same situation as some of the other countries that have existed before in terms of, needing tons and tons of aid and not really being able to afford this stuff. I do think Israel has a part of their defense budget that is ready to be allocated for things like this. Remember, Palantir was in Israel and Tel Aviv since 2014, right? So it's not like they're a stranger to the Israeli government or don't know how the Israeli government operates. I'm sure they were serving the Israeli government to some extent before this happened. But now that this happened, it's more likely that they're working with them and they're probably getting paid for this. Israel has one of the best defense, industries in the world. People have argued that their CIA, their version of the CIA, is even better than the United States CIA, which is why it was such a shock that the Hamas attacks actually happened. But they got caught off guard. And as a result of that, that's why Palantir is saying, hey, maybe our software may be useful and it can help mitigate some of these issues that you guys are having. So from that perspective, what we are seeing here is a strategic partnership with Israel and Palantir, and it's a lot more official. Now, the second implication of this outside of Israel, I believe having the money to be able to pay for this, is what it means to the stakeholders that don't want to work with Palantir now that they're officially working with Israel. I think this announcement is going to have two subsets of parties that agree or disagree. There's going to be one set of parties that mainly do business in the Middle East, and they're going to disagree with Palantir openly supporting the Israeli government, and they're never going to want to work for Palantir. And it is what it is. Now, does Snowflake or Datadog necessarily have a different opinion than Alex Karp when it comes to Israel versus Hamas? I don't think so. I just don't think Frank Slootman wants to put his name out there that explicitly. And so maybe Snowflake's going to get some more contracts over Palantir because of this, because of his lack of, willing to be out there. And that's basically what Karp said a couple days ago, is like, you know what, we came to Tel Aviv to do our first announcement in our first board meeting to embarrass the people that don't want to do this board meeting because essentially they have the same opinion as us, but they're afraid to voice that opinion. So we're going to lose some customers. It's going to happen. Coach Rep said this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago while he was with me, that we are going to alienate some people in the Middle East and clients in the Middle East that don't like Palantir being this explicit, even though other companies are explicit, even if they're not literally explicit. However, we are also going to gain a lot of respect from the international community, from the NATO community, and from companies across the world that want to see Israel win and not, have just insane terrorist attacks happen in one day on their ground, to the point where, you've got a national group saying death to all Jews. Like, there are a lot of companies that don't want that to happen, and as a result of that are likely going to work with Palantir just because of the respect that they have for Palantir in general. So I think Karp and company, they basically made a decision that this was going to outweigh something else. And now today that they have made an official strategic partnership, like, it's not, you can say I stand with Israel and, that is what it is. You can, buy a New York Times ad and say Palantir stands with Israel. When you are officially working with the IDF, everyone knows, right? Like, now it's not a secret anymore. Now it's not just you stand with Israel. You are quite literally supplying the defense technology in order to help Israel continue to be successful. And so from that perspective, you're going to lose some clients, but I also think you're going to gain a lot of more potential clients that are excited to work with you and actually, believe in the cause that you are trying to stand up for as well. Especially when a lot of the other companies, I don't think there's a lot of companies that are going to pick Hamas over Israel, but they're not going to be as vocal about it. And in this context, Palantir believes it's good for business to be vocal about it, but also support their mission, which is, love it or hate it, a company that's standing up for something they believe in. And in a world where every company says they believe in something, but then their actions don't prove it, you got to give them something in terms of their ability to actually stand on their own two feet and defend what they have to say. So that's what we have from Palantir in Israel. Another thing I wanted to show you guys here, this was Sham Sanker. He tweeted this today. Here he went to a kibbutz where people were murdered, and he was basically, honestly, his tweet says there are no words, right? This was at the Nova Musical Festival grounds. This is where that at the music festival, many people were just immediately shot and killed as they were trying to run away from terrorists. And so you've got another C-suite executive who's in Tel Aviv, kind of looking at the pain and suffering that exists in Israel right now, and also continuing to say, well, our software should be on the front lines to make sure that this does not happen. Chad, he is a Palantir forward deployed architect. He commented underneath, in so many ways, it's hard to truly get the impact until you are standing in ground truth. Thanks for being out at the edge, representing and taking in the pure pain and anguish of these souls and their nation. So the reason I'm bringing up his comment is because he's a forward deployed engineer at Palantir. I'm sure there's a lot of people at Palantir that don't internally agree with whatever Palantir is doing. And Karp said basically you can see the door on your way out if you disagree. You got Chad, someone who's been there for about, I think, 10 years now, basically saying, look, I understand what this company is doing. I understand why this company's technology is so important. And at the end of the day, if our company's technology can stop stuff like this from happening in the future, which no one wants to see happen, then maybe it's a good thing that we're actually on the front lines, even if we have to take the pain from the public that disagrees about us being so explicit. So this is a pretty big deal. I mean, we've got earnings coming up on, it's not announced yet, but I believe it's going to be around that February 16th range. And I do think we are going to get some numbers in regards to what this means in terms of working with Israel, even if it's not this quarter, some expectations for Q1 around, what it means in terms of revenue or what it means in terms of strategic partnerships, maybe clientele, talent we're getting from Israel. But on top of that, I also think we are going to see either increased customer count in Q4 as a result of some of the stuff that has been happening over the past couple of weeks, not just in terms of boot camps, but also geopolitically what's going on. And then as a result of that, that's going to influence our top line growth. I'm going to do a much broader video going in depth in terms of what I expect for Q4 earnings, but this strategic partnership, I do believe, is going to have implications not only on Q1 and guidance going forward, but on Q4, because it seems like all of this is coming together now, but it was all planned for the past couple months. I mean, they were in Tel Aviv in December discussing all this stuff, so we're going to see in Q4 what they end up saying. Final thing I want to say is the Red Sea conflict. So the Iranian-backed Houthis that are in the Red Sea are having massive implications right now in global supply chains. Tesla just shut down production, or at least delayed parts of their production in the Berlin, Germany factory till February 12th. That's a month from now, which is massively going to affect their Q1 production numbers. And that's why we see Tesla down about 4% on the day. And that Red Sea conflict that I've been covering on the Market Open every day is going to have implications for supply chains, particularly because a lot of routes for supply chains now have to go through the Greater Horn of Africa, which is a broader route, which means higher shipping costs, higher input costs, a little bit more stickier on inflation, supply chain bottlenecks, all that stuff. I want to keep an eye on that in relationship to Palantir, because there is a world in which a lot of these companies have their supply chains kind of flipped overnight, especially if this Red Sea conflict doesn't get any better. The United States launched airstrikes yesterday on the Houthis because they're really getting tired of the fact that this is messing up the global economy and the supply chains that we have. And at the end of the day, you can't have this stuff continue to happen. And you could only imagine that there is going to be some level of disruption that's happening in the world, and Palantir software might be deployed. It leads me to the final thing I want to say, which is what I tweeted today, is that we are seeing the manifestation of what Karp said a while ago. His words in that early 2022 interview at Stanford about the world becoming more deglobalized and unsafe ring more and more true. Ukraine, Israel, China, Taiwan potentially, and now what's going on in the Red Sea as a result of what's happening in Israel because the Houthis are doing this in protest of Palestinians. And bad times are good for Palantir because their software can help mitigate those bad times becomes more and more true. So a lot of stuff going on right now in the world of Palantir, and it's a lot to cover as this company, which I believe is not only the most interesting company in the world, but one of the companies that's probably going to have the most impact over the next decade. They're getting a lot of stuff done, and it's a lot to cover as we go through over the coming months and keep covering this entire story with Palantir. Palantir Weekly will be today, 11 p.m. as usual. I'm going to start uploading Daily Palantir on Saturday and Sunday. I think there is enough news to be able to cover 7 days a week. We'll see if that continues, but so far I do want to cover Daily Palantir on Saturday and Sunday, so there will be an episode there. So if you have 15 minutes on Saturday and Sunday, make sure you check out Daily Palantir starting on the weekends now as well. Thank you, everybody, for being here. DailyPalantir.substack.com. Newsletter every single day. Free email newsletter. You guys can sign up and get the video version of this news in newsletter email format. And that's it for me. Thank you, everybody, for joining me this week. Lots of big news in the world of Palantir. And let's see what happens as we get closer to Q4 earnings. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. I will see you later.